Morning, great chatter already. This is fantastic. You've all had your coffee outside, I hope. Good morning, everyone. My name is Helen Murphy, and I'm the Head of School of Education and Lifelong Learning here in WIT, and the 2019 Chair of the HELLIN Network, not named after me. HELLIN is the Higher Education Institutions Ireland Network and is a national network of HEIs engaged with lifelong learning. This morning, I want to welcome all of my HELLIN colleagues representing a number of universities and institutes of technology, UCC, CIT, NUIG, UL, DCU, MU, Maynooth, and Trinity College Dublin. I also welcome all of our speakers and presenters here today, colleagues from across WIT, practitioners and researchers, and all of you here involved and engaged in lifelong learning. Our hope for today is that we all have an opportunity to hear and to share our experiences and insights about lifelong learning and how it can prepare us for the future. I encourage you all to interact with all of our sessions, pose questions to our speakers and panellists, and most importantly, have an opportunity to go away from today with some inspiration and ideas for the future. Before we begin proceedings, I just want to draw your attention to the fire exits. So there's one here to my right-hand side and one at the back of the auditorium. All of the sessions today will take place in this auditorium and in 2 rooms upstairs. Anybody have any questions about where sessions are on, with registration desk just outside. We'll be taking photos during the day, and we also have Maya, which is a first, certainly for us in the school, so good morning Maya, at the back of the auditorium. So Maya is a visual harvester, and she's going to be capturing ideas, concepts, questions and shared insights from our discussions today. So she'll be developing the visual at the back throughout the day, so I'm really looking forward to how this, what this looks like. To open our conference this morning, I'm delighted to invite the President of WIT, Professor Willie Donnelly, to give the opening address.
Thank you, Helen. You're all very welcome. A new word for me today, visual harvester. And last night I hear you were all out to grow, where it also harvests food, so maybe the team is the harvester of this conference. You're all very welcome to Waterford Institute of Technology. We're delighted to have so many experts from so many different institutes in Ireland coming together under the HELLIN network. I'm glad to say we live up to our reputation today because it's sunny southeast and we have the sun. So I'm glad you didn't organise it for yesterday. It might be slightly embarrassing. I was, in actual fact, by coincidence, I was looking at the some documentation on Europe yesterday. One of them was the European Pillar of Social Rights, which was released in 2018. And it states, as its first principle, that everyone has a right to quality and inclusive education, training and lifelong learning in order to maintain and acquire skills that allow full participation in society and successful transition in the labour market. It also states the right of everyone to timely and tailor-made assistance to improve employment or self-employment prospects, to training and re-qualification, to continued education, to support for job search. Fostering the development and competence is one of the aims of the vision towards a European education area, and would be able to harness the full potential of education and culture as drivers for jobs, social fairness, active citizenship, as well as a means to experience European identity. I've read it out for a reason, because I think, you know, in the 1960s, 70s and 80s, we only taught about education in relation to job prospects, to people's employment. But now our understanding and our objectives for society and the knowledge economy has changed. At the heart of that economy is education, is knowledge. But it's the democratization of education and knowledge. It's about making education and knowledge available to all citizens, so that citizens can play an active role in society, in a sustainable society. And this changes how we in educators need to look at education and our role in education. Because in a democratization of education and knowledge, it's a shared experience. It's no longer us as the teacher, as the experts, talking down to the pupil. It's about building relationships. It's about personalization of education. It's about allowing citizens to access knowledge whenever and wherever. And it's about creating an environment where the student becomes the contributor and the teacher becomes the learner. And creating this type of environment is a very exciting experience. And I'm glad to say the work that you're doing is hugely important to creating that environment. And creating, when you think about it, the society that we all aspire towards. And in a way, it's about breaking down the barriers. It's about removing the walls from the established educational establishments. For us, in the Institute, we've recently published our strategic plan, a very ambitious strategic plan. And at the very heart of that strategic plan is the idea of lifelong learning and continuous professional development. And it's something that we've always done, and thanks to our School of Education and the wonderful people who work there, we've always done it in partnership with our stakeholders, whether it's industry, whether it's in society, civil society, government, we do it together. And I think this is hugely important, to build an environment where you can work together. And these type of conferences are hugely important because we all have different experiences. We all engage in our communities and our stakeholders, and bringing it together and sharing that and learning from each other, I think that is what really education is about. So I wish you the best in the conference. I was just reading the various speakers. It's very, very exciting. And of course, in particular, I see our keynote speaker is a great friend of this institute, which is Meg Benkei, who is Vice President of Academic Affairs in the Empire State College, upstate New York. Meg was a Fulbright Scholar in WIT. We were privileged to have Meg, and I had many wonderful conversations with Meg. Meg inspired me to think about lifelong education, online education in a different way. So I think it's great, Meg. Thank you very much for coming again, and we're always delighted to have you. So look, have a great day and enjoy your visit to the Institute and enjoy the engagements. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Willie. So you've stolen some of my thunder in terms of my introduction to Meg, so forgive if there's any repetition. But our keynote speaker today is a really good friend to WIT and to the Institute. Also, since 2018, Meg is a visiting professor to our school, and she's an internationally recognized scholar in the field of adult education and adult learning. So I know we're all really looking forward to hearing you sharing your insights with us this morning. As Willie has said, Meg is a Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs at the State University of New York, Empire State College, and Professor, School of Graduate Studies in Adult Learning and Emerging Technologies. Meg was the first Fulbright research professor at WIT in our school in 2015, where she was conducting research into the further and adult education sector and advising us on online and blended learning strategies and modes of delivery. Meg has had an extensive administration career at Empire State College, previously serving as Dean of the Centre for Distance Learning and acting President of the college. As a professor, Meg chaired the education faculty and coordinated the programs in adult learning and emerging technologies. Meg was inducted into the International Adult and Continuing Hall of Fame in the US for her outstanding contributions to adult and online learning, and was recognized for the most outstanding achievement in online learning by an individual in 2007. Meg has also served as a commissioner for the Middle States Association for Higher Education, chairing the Substantive Change Committee, which oversees areas such as online and competency-based programs. Recent book chapters include, in an edited volume, Leading Change in Distance Education, Optimizing Student Success, Leading Beyond the Institution, Visualizing and Actionable Future, Game Changers, Education and Information Technology. We are delighted to welcome Meg here this morning, and we look forward to hearing her thoughts on how lifelong learning is helping us prepare for our future world. Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen, and thanks, Willie. It's a pleasure to be back here at WIT and in Ireland. And I was told to remind everybody that, Waterford here is just an hour and a bit away from Dublin, and people should be coming, more of us from England and others, to visit lovely Waterford here because it's actually quite close to the rest of Europe. So we're very pleased to have colleagues here from England, from New York, and easy to come here to Waterford. And, they don't really need to remind me how easy it is to come here because I'll come anytime anybody asks me to come to Waterford to work with so many good colleagues. It's such a pleasure to see so many of them in the room today. Anne Graham, who helped to write the proposal to bring me here as a Fulbright scholar, Helen as dean, Neil, Laura, all the faculty, Geraldine, Carol, others that I interviewed as a part of my further education work. I was also very thrilled to see so many people in the audience who are from the further education sector. Hands up, I talked to a lot of people who are from further education or from working in community development, other areas. It seemed to me about half the audience here today might be from higher education and half from further education. Does you guys judge how many people, faculty types, instructors, others, and then administrators, I saw a few, and people who work in support, instructional design, other areas. I know worked with so many people here at WIT that I really enjoy being here today. Let's see. First, for those who don't know me, I'll give you a little bit of sense of who I am and talk a little bit about Empire State College. Several of you have seen me speak before. In May, I was here to talk a little bit more about blended and online learning. Today, I'm talking a little bit more about the recognition of prior learning, future learning, and competency-based learning. But I'll just give you a sense of Empire State College. We're part of the State University of New York. Those of you in this part of the world might be most familiar with the British Open University, which is quite similar to Empire State College. We were founded in the same period. We were part of a progressive movement in higher education that said, we need to unblock the boundaries of higher education. We need to bring students and learners to the center of education. We need to use the recognition of prior learning. From our very beginning, we have been strong leaders in the United States related to the recognition of prior learning, grounded in students' program, building on experiential learning with learning contracts in our design. We've moved now to being half online and half blended. We are about anywhere between 17,000 to 20,000 students, depending upon how you count. And we're about, again, half of those study online, and about half of them come to one of our learning centers that are across the state. So you can see these dots if you're familiar with New York State. A large proportion of our students from downstate in New York City. But throughout our rural counties, upstate New York, we have small learning centers where people connect with us. And one of our hallmarks of success, I believe, is the fact that our learners connect with our learning centers physically for meeting with their mentors, student services staff, and others, but then also study online, working with high-quality instructors, professors, lecturers throughout the state. We also have a small number of international programs, some in Europe, Prague, Albania, some in the Middle East, Albania, in Lebanon, also down some in the Caribbean. And in these programs, we also work with degree completion programs. We're an open access institution. Everybody comes to us with some experience from someplace else. We often say we're the third or fourth college or university that people come to. So we're good at packaging all their experiencing and bringing it to degree. We also partner with external organizations. Our largest partner is with labor unions. We work with apprenticeship programs where students do their electrical apprenticeship. We recognize that learning, and then they get the equivalent of a 2-year degree by us filling in the liberal arts and other areas. We also do graduate education, MBA, teacher education, ed tech, data analytics, liberal studies, and we're just hoping to move with a educational doctorate next year. We're also evolving our online programs. I'm not talking so much about them today, but as we meet on breaks or during the presentations this afternoon, I'd love if anybody wants to talk more about online, blended, those kinds of areas. I'd love to share any ideas, any advice, learn things from you as we move forward. So Willie already identified sort of the policy context of which we work, the changing nature of employability, and how the dramatic ways our institutions are moving, both in Europe and in the United States. What we're finding is reduced support for higher education, which for us means increases in tuition. It seems to me you had recently experienced some of those pressures, but maybe getting some larger support recently in the last 5 years since I've been coming here. We are seeing some challenges with how our policies and practices evolve. We've had significant changes in our student participation. In the United States, stronger participation by underrepresented minorities, but consequently some problems with persistence and completion rates that we've needed to work on. I think we're coming out of a time where we're seeing improvements in that area. We've seen reduced investment by employers in supporting tuition support, but they've moved to different models of supporting higher education through competency-based programs. But many of these competency-based programs are for generally the higher skilled worker, leaving behind somewhat the lower skilled worker. So we're trying to work together on ways that we can partner between higher education and industry. And it looks like there are some related trends here. Recent calls for greater investments. I saw Helen shared a number of the papers related to how Springboard has expanded and been supported at a much higher level. Further educations, colleges are seeing investment in the teaching in those areas and seeing stronger participation and completion. I see that the focus is more on connecting and integrating work and learning and bringing those workplace experiences into the classroom, while also seeing that the learners can apply that learning to the real world context. There's greater attention to opening access to working learners and underrepresented populations while ensuring that all students can succeed. I think we're seeing new forms of credentials, short-term, competency-based, stackable credentials more and more here and in the US, and that recognition of learning acquired outside the institution and allowing that learning to count toward credentials has become more prevalent. I also do think there's some threats from industry moving to deliver credentials that aren't recognized by higher education, which I think in the long run could potentially hurt our learners. I had the opportunity to attend the HELLIN conference 5 years ago, and in fact I saw some presentations. Sarah was presenting there. I saw Sarah and a few others who was presenting dissertation research. And I must say I'm really impressed by the policy and practice changes over the last 5 years here in Ireland. You know, when I was here 5 years ago and I mentioned things like part-time students, they'd say, oh no, you know, we're not supporting, you know, as much as we can. I see so much more response here in the last 5 years to bring forward for part-time students. Helen shared, you know, numerous papers with me on the policy context, and Laura shared this one, that it was a recent paper on a student is a student is a student, consultation on part-time and flexible study in Irish higher education. And I must tell you, these are some of the same challenges we're working on in the US to make sure that there's support for people who can only study part-time and work full-time and often carry full-time lives beyond that. So today I hope to focus on a couple of areas. Advancement in the recognition of prior learning, emergent changes about the connection between the world of work and higher education with micro-credentials, and how we can connect learning science, learning analytics and technology for better understanding of our learners, and maybe share a few examples for what we've been working on in my state to work there. So I'd like to talk a little bit how these shifts enable us to consider a new model for higher education, one that is a little bit more responsive to a world in which we need to think about skills and skill development differently. Whether called the recognition of prior learning or competency-based assessment, these methods help students save time and money. So those of us, how many of us in the room have worked in the, I know Maeve's here, recognition of prior learning for a long time. This whole group up here, there's a group back here. You know, recognition of prior learning has different levels of support. I was talking to a colleague last night, you know, less so development, more so development in England, more so in Ireland, even more so in France. In the United States, my own institution's been a leader, but what some of the work has shown in the US is that it's not only about saving students time and money. There's research done by CALE, which is, it's the Council for Adult and Experiential Learning in the United States, that shows that RPL validate and enhances, transfers self-regulation of learning. So if you teach the learner on how to assess their own learner, they learn about self-regulation and learning. So they develop their own learning skills. Additionally, learners who do RPL are actually better students. So they get better grades, they're more likely to complete. So that process of learning about how to recognize your own learning teaches you how to be a better student. And then even further research that's been done at my own institution finds that learners who do RPL actually become better workers. So when they go back to the job, when you validate the learning that they've done in the workplace, if they're in a similar type position, they validate and become better at that job. So a colleague of mine's done interviews of those labor union apprenticeships that I talked to you about. And what he has found is, you know, if they're getting credit for how to, you know, negotiate labor contracts, they're better at negotiating the labor contracts when they go back on the job. So the recognition of prior learning is one way that we can transfer that learning between all three of those domains. One of our challenges of how to work with more in the economic and the industry environment is how fast jobs are changing. And I think I don't need to talk to this audience about the fact that studies show that we don't even imagine what the future jobs are. So, this particular study was a 2017 report which showed that 85% of the jobs in 2030 have not even yet been invented. So trying to teach the learner about how to perform on a specific job, as Willie indicated, it's not really what we need to do. We need to train them with the skills and the learning approaches that will help them to move forward. This is data from the United States. This is McKinsey's analysis of Moody. But the jobs are not evenly distributed, in your country or in my country. And what you find is we have changing jobs in the cities. There are certain cities that have development of certain categories. We have challenges in our rural areas. We have challenges in distressed areas of America where we've lost jobs and they've not yet regained jobs. So we have to work with our learners in their context and where they live. And sometimes they're not going to leave the rural area where they live to go to a city to find a job. So we have to help them to understand what the job market and what skills they can learn to be able to work in this new employability area. So we need, I think, a better sense of how we come in and out of what the workforce demands. And I think Willie indicated this at the beginning. We used to think of education as something that started, stopped, moved on to how we think about work. And in reality, this is all changing now. And what I think we're seeing is more development of shorter certificate programs, ways that people, there are always going to be people who are going to pursue a full degree. But I think, when you look at some of the statistics, people who are coming back to education may also already have a degree. So they're coming in for a second layer to get a new credential. So we need to have something that integrates that work and learning beyond just the student's individual learning and competencies. We need to leverage technology in new ways to improve how we do the role of learning recognition, to being less of a tangential offering at the college and more integrated into the core. So this new vision of the recognition of prior learning needs to be continuous throughout the educational experience. So, the way I think that we've approached recognition of prior learning is that it's the responsibility of the individual coming in. So that if he or she comes into the institution, he has to declare himself that he's going to pursue it. I think now what we need to think about this as a combination of the employer's responsibility and our responsibility as higher educators, that we together work with the individual to help to document that learning. And that's why I think, at least in the US, we've seen stronger amounts of competency-based programs and other efforts. We're also seeing greater networks between employers and industry. I'm sharing a link here. This is a fairly recent effort in the United States. We've had a lot of consortiums of organizations that work with big organizations, like in our case in the US, Walmart, Starbucks, and offer educational services to their employees and combinations back and forth, and are networking with those higher education institutions to deliver degrees that will be helpful to their particular employees. This group is a newer group in the US. I mentioned, a lot of those efforts that are bringing employers and industry together are working with the higher skilled jobs. This particular group, what I like about it is it's working to help some of those learners who are somewhat left out of the system. So they're in the United States, I know you don't really have the equivalent of the community colleges. It's something in between further education and your universities and technology institutes. But this Unmendel group is working to help employers understand how you can come in and get sort of a 1 year or 2 year credential and then maybe come back to higher education. This is another group at Astra and MC. They're doing a lot of work with colleges and universities in the United States to look at real data related to jobs and then helping higher education to do better scheduling of modules and programs to help to meet that need. So higher education working together with researchers on labor data to figure out how we can make sure that once people complete either a credential or a full degree, they can move forward. Those of us have been watching badging, happening across the world to some success. I have to admit, I was early on very skeptical about badges. In the United States, I was a Girl Scout, and I was never that thrilled with the idea of getting badges. But at least in the employment sector, there's been greater attention to badging as a recognition of what a particular learning area is. I think the ends of it that are particularly interesting are the ones that involve peer review. So it's not only the satisfaction of some credential, but it's also having reviews by peers connected to the badging. An interesting project that I saw lately was Northeastern University, which is a school in the US, is now working with IBM. IBM assigns the badge in several areas of project management, and Northeastern will accept those into their graduate level programs in project management. So they're working together to identify workplace learning, moving it in. You know, that was something that, at least in the US, very few institutions were doing the recognition of prior learning at the graduate level, except for military credentials. So this is a new movement for us. This group, where's Laura? I was telling Laura about this group last night. You know, those of us watched the trends towards MOOCs. How many have done a MOOC in the last month? How many did one like maybe 4 or 5 years ago? Yeah, just about everybody in the room. So MOOCs kind of went a little bit, you know, in their phase. When I was here in Ireland 5 years ago, I did one from FutureLearn on blended learning. I thought it was fabulous. It was a really good MOOC, but many of them were not that good, and many of them had poor completion rates. What's very interesting, what's happened now on MOOCs, they're now calling some of the more elite institutions in the United States have developed a new word called SPOC, Small Private Online Course. So instead of being a massive online open course, it's a small private online course, which is basically how places like WIT and Empire State College deliver online instruction, a small private online course of 20 to 25 students. But the elite institutions have defined it as a SPOC. And so, but there are some good things related to these SPOCs. And what it is that colleges in the US like Columbia, MIT, are doing online courses, but they're better supporting them with blended on-demand learning. So the instructors are available 1 night a week, 1 night every other week for consultation. Group activities are defined, local Saturday sessions set up, so that they are presenting a model that is a good quality model for improving how online is delivered. So I think we'll start to see some greater recognition for this type of work. The thing that scares me about this a little bit is the places like MIT and Columbia are delivering this instruction for a fee to individuals, but not awarding credit in this particular case. So you're paying about the similar rate of pay that you pay to take a course, but you don't get the credit. And I think that's a little challenging, because I would like our adult learners to have the credits. So either through recognition of prior learning at a place like this or at a place like my institution. So I'm hoping, as you can see, that learning recognition can serve a way to kind of drive higher education, to build our curriculum, and to bridge the learning between learning in higher education and in work. And I'm hoping that our curriculum will be improved by this knowledge, that our faculty, as they recognize the learning that learners achieve, also improve their own lecturing and teaching by bringing in real-world experience. I think these short-term credentials are a little scary to higher education. I think they sometimes feel like they're threatening our turf for, awarding of a full, larger module. but I think we have to recognize that today's learners, particularly those that are 25 to 35, are going to be looking for shorter duration work. I also think we have to get a little bit more effective at our learning assessment. Even though we're in the business of higher education, I think we can better use technology to improve assessment and to also figure out ways to protect faculty time for doing the real quality assessment that we want faculty to do on evaluating projects, working with learners at the beginning stages, and less focus on individually assessing work. I wanted to talk a little bit about pedagogy and some of the things that we're working on in higher education at my own institution and in New York. First I wanted to start talking a little bit about technology. When I was mentioning the work that we need to do in better assessing learning and in better presenting online environments, I did want to shout out for one program here at WIT. And this is some work, some of the instructional designers are here. Where's Pete? I don't, way in the back, Pete's hiding in the back. The professor who developed this course wasn't able to attend today, but there's a computer science, an ICT conversion course that's being offered on Springboard, right? Yeah. And but what I like about this particular course is it's using technology more effectively to deliver instruction in the online environment. And I urge you to talk to Pete and others about it. But when I mentioned that those schools like MIT and others in the United States who are expert at learning science, they understand how people learn. We also have expertise here in Ireland, and people who are connecting. What I like about this particular project is that the faculty member brought the experience he had from the work environment to this program. So he said, how do people learn computer science? How do people work in the workplace? How do they work in teams? What's integral about doing this kind of work? So his core started with, how do you get learners to work in teams when that's not been traditionally done well in online environments? Then he also worked with the WIT people here who do research on learning science. How do you actually help students to learn in the online environment? Then he engaged with creative instructional designers here to actually think about the technology differently. How do you utilize the technology to bring people into teams? And then this pedagogy that was developed in this environment, which I think is much more game-based. I mean, the way it feels, it's much more, a lot of our online courses are very flat, just discussions, not much engagement. We really need to advance the field, and I think WIT here is doing some good work to advance that field. And part of it is making it easy for faculty. So when you think about how faculty want to move from teaching in a face-to-face environment to teaching in an online environment, working with them so that they can do very short, tight video presentations, or working with them where they can give very tight, short feedback to students. So we're trying to figure out how the next generation is going to evolve. And I think any work that you guys might do might look at some of this work they've done here at WIT. And just finishing up with a couple of areas on how my own institution is trying to bridge the recognition of prior learning, employer connections, and higher education. So as I mentioned, we're New York State. Buffalo's at the end over by Niagara Falls. Many people who visit the United States come to Niagara Falls. But Buffalo's a pretty tough city. It got really hurt in the end of the steel and auto industry. It's one of the cities in the U.S. that's starting to come back, but it's a little tough. We have a workforce development center there that was developed by the state to deliver workforce training. So somewhat similar to some of the further education efforts probably here in Ireland, but not exactly true. But the development at this workforce training center has not been hugely successful because it's been somewhat out of the higher education sphere. So it's been kind of working independently. So what the governor is doing now is they graciously gave us this building. So with all the programs that go involved in it, but we're not going to try to deliver the programs that are really in the realm of workforce development, but we can partner with those to offer the degree completion beyond the technical programs that they do here. We also are embedding within our locations, so I showed you that map where we have, you know, all the little tiny locations. In those particular locations, we're partnering up with our Department of Labor. And so in Albany, New York City, and Brooklyn, which are three of our largest areas, we're co-locating the Department of Labor. We're sharing space with them, sharing costs, and it's been a very symbiotic relationship. So our researchers on our faculty and our people who work in institutional research are working with the Department of Labor on analyzing labor data in those particular regions. So the people who are the researchers are working together out of those locations. Secondarily, we're working with the career connectors, so the people who are walking in, so the underserved who are looking for employment, they also at the desks beside them will see Empire State College so that they can talk about career development with both the Labor Department and Empire State College. We're, in this situation, we're recognizing not only the State University of New York, Empire State College, but also the 64 other SUNY colleges that are available. The other thing that we continue to do, even though I was kind of a little degrading about MOOCs, we still do MOOCs at Empire State College. We do a MOOC on career brand management, and it's basically a MOOC to expose the brand of Empire State College to people outside. We've had hundreds of thousands of learners participate in this MOOC. A lot of the people are people who work in industry and human resource management, people who are training and development managers, and those who work with others. So it's about developing your own brand as an individual, but it also helps for human resource people to learn more about how to do this work with individuals. This MOOC has entered a new generation from when I was here before. There's a lot within this MOOC. It's delivered by Coursera, but what the developer of it, who's a faculty member at Empire State, has done is develop tracking devices. So similar to your Fitbit, you have your career tracking on your phone where you're looking at various competencies that you're developing. So for example, he's developed, say if you're working on proficiency in accounting, he has identified, similar to what you guys have in Ireland, where there's competencies developed for working in the credentials in the area of accounting. You basically follow an application to identify where you're developing those competencies, either in the workplace or at your college. Mention just a couple of other projects I continue to watch. Otago Polytech in New Zealand. I've mentioned this project when I've come here before, but it's called Capable New Zealand. They're working with employers to identify, so if you're a new woman manager in a business, you can work with your employer to have mentoring in the workplace, to have learning that can be evaluated in that environment. So you go to school for a year, you go back into work, you're working with your manager as a mentor, developing certain skills, coming back to school. So kind of coming in and out. They've done this kind of work in New Zealand. They've had particular success in working with very underserved populations where people can't get into the job level, but they can, once they get in that environment, develop in that environment. So I've been real impressed by the work that they do there. Impressed by recent work here at WIT, getting the word out on recognition of prior learning to others, so it's more explainable. I know Maeve and Laura and others here have worked on this idea of having a portal that, I think, what I said at the beginning, that we need to, as higher educators, we need to work with industry, and we need to work beyond the individual just finding us. We have to present the information in a way that can help to translate what it is that they might do. So, I'll finish off, I think we need to, again, look at, shorter competencies, things that will help learners to address and find where we want, where they have options and where that they might move. I think that, an assumption that we've had as adult educator is, in order to be student-centered, we have to let the student drive. We need to let the student drive. And I think what I'm finding more and more is that we need to provide greater scaffolding. And this Gandhi quote, "A rising tide doesn't raise people who don't have a boat." We have to build the boat for them. We have to give them the basic infrastructure to rise with the tide. I think, and I don't mean this in a demeaning sense, that we don't need to recognize them as individuals with strengths that can move forward, but I think it means that we need to help to decrease the barriers to higher education for all lifelong learners. So, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. You've given us, I think, multiple themes. What's wonderful is the commonality in terms of the challenges that you're experiencing in the US. We have them here, we have them in Ireland, we have them across Europe. Discussions around RPL, micro-credentialing, new pedagogies, technology, and future work, work-based learning. I think we're all involved in all of those conversations. Your metaphor that we are, and we might be, boat builders, that whole notion of scaffolding to open access to higher education for those who have not had opportunities to do so, I think is a really important one for all of us here. I'm going to suggest that if people have questions or whatever, we might hold them until the panel discussion later on at 2 o'clock and give everybody an opportunity to break into our breakout sessions now. And we have, as I said, we have 3 parallel sessions happening now. One that's happening here, and the other 2 sessions are up on the 2nd floor, I think. There's people outside to direct you upstairs. We'll try and keep to time as much as we possibly can. So can I encourage our HELLIN chairs? Oh, tea, coffee night. Oh, God almighty, I completely forgot about that. I'm just pushing you all out. Enjoy the tea, coffee, and then our parallel sessions should be starting at 11:30. Okay, great. Okay, thanks very much. Forgot about the tea and coffee.